to me, it was always normal what he did. See, I never saw us as different from people until I started kind of, you know, you get into school and you go to other people's houses and all this stuff, you know, and you start going, oh, wow, you know, when you spend the night with Johnny, your little buddy, you go, wow, Johnny's house is a lot different than mine, you know. They're not grooving over at Johnny's house, you know, but my house is popping, you know. And that was the truth, because with Dad, you know, again, they were always sitting around with guitars and there were people hanging out. And, you know, the history of my father gets really deep that we'll kind of get into. But, you know, he always had a lot of friends. And at that point, you know, he's bringing people like, you know, Jerry Garcia over, and just, you know, he was always showing up with people, you know, and going to people like Wexler loves to talk about Dad just showing up at his house with Bob Dylan, you know, said, hey, can we spend the night? You know, that's the type of person Dad was. It was the type of person he was. He would just, you know, he loved to kind of just spontaneously groove and kind of, so I'd say, you know, my earliest kind of memories of him being professional, you know, like playing professionally, were stuff like, wanting to play his gold records. Like I remember my mom and dad telling me I used to throw a fit as a kid. I wanted to play his little gold records. Like I didn't want to play the one you were supposed to play. I wanted to play the one on the wall on the gold record. I'd point, you know, I'd freak out, you know. And so I remember like all that. I remember, you know, listening to records when he'd bring it home that he just cut as a kid, and he'd go, hey, listen to this. And I'd be a little kid, and he'd bring home, you know, oh, hell, I don't know, Mendocino and all that. And we'd be listening to little records, you know, the 45s back then. I guess they were the acetates or whatever. He'd bring them home to just listen to them. He recognized how into his music I was. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't like, you know, oh, I'm just going to have my boy there because he's my boy and he's going to be there. Because I say, if you know Doug Sahm, he didn't care if you were family related or not. If you didn't belong on stage, other than, you know, come up and play a song and groove because you're my boy, you weren't touring, making records, and doing what I did professionally with Dad, because he was real weird about who he played with. And it also made me feel good that I, at some point, had graduated to the level to where he, you know, I was playing in his, you know, in the SDQ, and then he'd have me in his little Doug Sahm solo bands, and eventually his country bands. And he was just calling me, you know, we had our harmonies down, and we were really getting it down. So it really made me feel validated as a musician, to know that deep down, I don't care what anyone else thought, I knew the truth, that Doug Sahm was having me up on stage because when we hit that vamp and we sang that harmony, it was right, and I was giving him what he needed as a partner on stage, you know. I never known a world without Augie Myers, you know what I mean? And I say that because I ended up knowing a world without people that I didn't want to know that world without. You know, the Dougs, the Rocky Moraleses, the blah, blah, blah. So at this point in my life, I don't know what it's, you know, I couldn't even imagine. I don't know what it's like to not have Augie around. Because to answer your question, he's been around my whole life. I was born into Augie and Doug's relationship. Our families were born into each other, you know? So, you know, it's a funny thing because they had a relationship both together and individually, you know? So I don't think they necessarily, because they were both talented, I don't think they could have necessarily not been anything without each other. But that starts getting a little crystal ball, you know what I mean? That's just kind of me assuming that, hey, these guys are both talented. They've done great things on their own. Who's to say they wouldn't eventually have gone on to do things? But history being what it is that those two guys got together, childhood friends that didn't play together. You got to remember, Augie and the story gets real gray and blurry. Augie and Doug knew each other for years as childhood buddies from Augie's parents' grocery store that my grandparents would shop at with Doug, my daddy, and Pop would go collect his baseball cards. And that was the big one there is Augie would, and Augie will tell you these stories, Augie would help Dad out with his baseball cards. And so they formed this bond where Dad knew, hey man, my buddy Augie is where I can go and score the baseball cards. And you know, that's the Myers own the store, the grocery store, and that's where the Sahm shop, and you know, their kid is all into the baseball card. And you know, you form as kids, that's how you form these little bonds. That was way before music or anything. I think that tells you a lot about the relationship, is that if it was just formed basically on a business thing of let's just get these guys together to play music and that's it, it might have been different. But the fact is they did have a history together that was beyond that. That's exactly the reason, bringing it full circle, is to do just that, to take the people who had supported Doug for so long and celebrate with them and remember Doug's legacy and have a good time and come out and dance and drink a beer to She's About to Move or whatever. And there's also the people who didn't get to see it the first time, who maybe had turned on to Doug just with all this recent activity of box sets and DVDs and stuff that we've been doing, with the estate. And that's one thing. They're all valid, and it's all great. Turning on the new fans is important, and taking care of the older fans is important too. Friends, fans, whatever you want to call them. So that's really what it's all about, is at the end of the day, the whole of the sum. By doing all this stuff, you take the older fans, you take the newer fans, and you kind of build together like clay something really solid. And that's the thing about the people who like real music. They tend to really stick with it. It's not fad music. We all have guilty pleasures of liking ear candy. It's okay. People try to be too cool music. Like, I only listen to jazz and I only listen to this. Okay, well, that sounds boring to me. I'm not trying to be a drag, but if you only listen to just blues and nothing else, really? I love blues. I love this. I love that. But, just speaking personally for me, it's like music's like emotions, isn't it? You're not always in the same mood all the time.